The heavy iron gates groaned as I pushed them apart, a sound that matched the weight pressing down on my chest after 20 years away. My name is Valerie. I am 33 years old, and every step I took down that long gravel driveway felt like walking through a life that had never truly been mine. The night air carried the fragrance of expensive food and white roses, Chloe's signature flower of choice. This was her engagement party, a lavish celebration bankrolled by our father's bottomless corporate wealth. Chloe had always been the family's prized daughter, the one who obeyed every rule and posed perfectly for every photograph. I was the opposite. I chose discipline, secrecy, and sacrifice over the gilded future my father had pre-designed for me. When I walked away from this house years ago, he didn't grieve. He built a story instead, one carefully constructed to protect his name. As I reached the grand entrance of the mansion, the muffled sound of classical music and champagne glasses drifted toward me. I steadied my breath, adjusted the cuffs of my black jacket, and walked inside. The warmth of the foyer hit me first, followed immediately by something far colder. Whispers. Heads turned. Relatives I hadn't seen in a decade looked at me with hollow sympathy, their gazes raking over me like judgment. They didn't see a sister returning for a celebration. Through the lies my father had carefully planted, they saw a disgraced woman, a coward who had supposedly broken under pressure and run from her responsibilities in shameful silence. I moved through the crowd of silk gowns and tailored suits, my footsteps steady against the marble floor. At the far end of the ballroom, elevated on a low stage, stood my father, immaculate, cold, calculated. Chloe stood beside him, glowing with the satisfaction of someone who had never once had to fight for anything she owned. The moment his eyes found me, the polished smile on his face curdled into something cruel. He reached for his microphone, the sharp feedback cutting through the music and silencing the room. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," he announced, his voice swelling with practiced authority. "It seems we have an unexpected guest this evening." He gestured toward me with dismissive ease, a smirk pulling at his mouth. "My daughter? Not quite. More like the coward who abandoned her squad, here to witness what genuine success looks like." Quiet, cutting laughter moved through the crowd. Chloe pressed her lips together to hide her smile, leaning slightly toward the stage. I stood absolutely still beneath the weight of 100 staring eyes, my spine straight, drawing from a reservoir of strength none of them could see or understand. I met the room's gaze without flinching, letting the silence say what I wouldn't. They believed they were dismantling me. They had no idea what was coming. The murmuring faded as my father shifted his tone into one of booming pride. "But tonight is not about past disappointments," he declared. "Tonight we celebrate a man of true honor joining this family, a man who embodies discipline, sacrifice, and elite leadership at its highest level. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my future son-in-law, Navy SEAL Commander Garrett Vance." The room erupted in applause. From the side of the stage, a man walked forward and claimed the attention of every person in the room. Garrett was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that couldn't fully conceal the rigid military architecture of his body. He moved like a man who assumed dominance in every space he entered. Chloe lit up completely, threading her arm through his and gazing at him as though he were royalty. My father descended from the stage with clear intention, steering Garrett directly toward me, using the decorated commander as a living instrument of my public humiliation. "Garrett, I know a man of your caliber appreciates real discipline," my father said loudly, making sure those nearby heard each word. "I'd like you to meet Chloe's older sister, Valerie. Sadly, she never possessed anything close to the fortitude you've spent your career demonstrating. She collapsed under pressure and disappeared when things became difficult." Garrett looked down at me, sweeping my jacket with a glance that carried cold, effortless pity. He extended his hand with a relaxed smile. "A pleasure," he said evenly, utterly unaware of who he was greeting. The silence between us thickened. Garrett's hand remained extended in the air while the surrounding guests watched with barely concealed smirks, waiting for me to shrink away from the gaze of a decorated SEAL commander. I didn't move. I held his eyes and saw the casual superiority sitting behind them like armor. Then, slowly and deliberately, I raised my right arm to accept his hand. The movement drew back my jacket cuff just slightly, enough for the chandelier's full brilliance to fall directly across my wrist. What it revealed made everything in the room change. There, carved deep into the pale skin, was a thick and jagged shrapnel scar, unmistakable in its shape and origin. It was not an ordinary wound. It was the signature mark of a customized explosive device used exclusively in the most remote and hostile classified theaters of operation. Anyone who had ever operated at the uppermost tier of special warfare would recognize it instantly. Garrett's hand closed around mine, and the moment his thumb passed over the raised tissue, his entire body locked up. His eyes dropped to the scar and stayed there. I watched the smug expression leave his face in less than a second. The color evacuated from his skin. His chest moved in sharp, uneven pulls. He tried to form words and couldn't. His fingers trembled against mine, and his expression transformed into something raw and unguarded, absolute terror. The commanding officer my father had just celebrated as an unstoppable force looked, in that moment, as if the ground beneath him had given way entirely. He stepped back, his eyes moving from my wrist to my face, as the full, staggering truth settled over him. He straightened his spine, raised his hand in a firm and trembling military salute, and forced out the words that tore the room open. "Ma'am, are you the Black Panther of the Marine Corps?" The ballroom went breathless. Every champagne glass fell silent. Every conversation stopped. All eyes locked onto Garrett, who held his salute without wavering, his posture immaculate and rigid. My father's triumphant expression froze on his face, his mouth parting without producing any sound. Chloe's eyes swung wildly between her fiancé and me, her features pulling into complete bewilderment. She grabbed at Garrett's sleeve with shaking fingers. "Garrett, what are you doing?" She laughed nervously, her voice cutting through the dead quiet. "You're saluting my sister. She's a failure, remember? Everyone is watching. Stop this!" My father stepped forward, throat clearing with aggressive authority. "Garrett, you've clearly made an error. Valerie was a low-level dropout who left under disgraceful circumstances. Lower your hand immediately." Garrett turned on my father with the full weight of his voice. "Sir, you will stop speaking." The words landed like a physical blow, and the room recoiled. He didn't drop his salute. He kept his eyes on mine with complete, unwavering reverence. "You have no idea who is standing in front of you. This woman is a Black operations legend. She is a decorated colonel who commanded the elite Phantom Division. When my platoon was completely surrounded and cut off during a classified joint task ambush in hostile territory, it was the Black Panther who disobeyed direct retreat orders, penetrated enemy lines alone, and brought every single one of my men home, breathing." He turned to face the horrified crowd, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "Every story you were handed is a calculated lie. She did not abandon her squad. She took shrapnel to the wrist and saved an entire unit of Navy SEALs. You are sharing a room with a national hero." A wave of sharp gasps moved through the ballroom as Garrett's words settled into the air. The flawless social fortress my father had spent decades constructing began fracturing in real time. His expression collapsed from arrogance into open, frantic panic. He looked around the room at the business associates and social elites who had been his allies moments ago, now staring at him with revulsion. The whispers had returned, but this time they circled him entirely. "James Mitchell, my legal representative, who had been positioned quietly at the edge of the room, stepped forward and opened his briefcase with calm precision. He spread a collection of verified military records, authenticated medical releases, and detailed financial statements across a nearby table. "The situation is considerably more serious than a fabricated story," Mitchell said, his voice reaching every corner of the room. This man did not simply lie to protect his reputation. He used his daughter's classified military status to intercept her high-tier service savings and combat injury compensation. He exploited her non-disclosure agreements, calculating that she could never legally speak out to reclaim what was taken. He stole millions from his own daughter while publicly labeling her a disgrace. The room went utterly still. Mitchell looked directly at my father. "Every dollar is documented. Every transaction is on record." Chloe's composure shattered. She stood shaking, looking between her fiancé and the ruins of the family she thought she knew. The guests who had laughed at me minutes ago now turned their shoulders away from my father in collective disgust. He stumbled backward toward the stage, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He reached toward me, one trembling hand extended, his voice reduced to a hollow, desperate sound. "Valerie, please. We can still find a way through this. Family doesn't have to end here. Think of the business. Think about what this does to our name." I looked at him for a long, quiet moment and felt nothing except the absolute certainty of what came next. "You should have considered family before you robbed a soldier," I said, my voice steady and clear. I turned away from him and did not look back. I gave him nothing. No opening, no mercy, no path through the wreckage he had created for himself. Beside me, Garrett withdrew his hand from Chloe's reach, his expression carrying the quiet finality of a man who would not attach himself to a family built on that kind of dishonor. The night air outside was clean and sharp as I pushed through the front doors and walked away from the estate. Behind me, I left the lies, the theft, the performance of a family that had never truly existed. Ahead of me was a future that carried only my name, my choices, and my own terms. Now I want to ask you something. What would you have done standing in my position? Have you ever looked across a room and seen your own family choose to destroy you? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, I've left 2 more on the final screen that have become favourites on this channel. They will not disappoint. Thank you for staying until the very end.